Good morning and welcome to my garden. For those of you who've been following my journey, you know that I love learning and that there's always more to discover, especially when I work with creation, the plants, the animals, the environment around me. And one thing I've been learning a lot about is chop and drop, Syntropics, ways to help the garden be healthy, to help the earth look after itself the way it's been designed to do so. So I'd like to take you on my journey this year of what I've discovered about mulch, chop and drop, Syntropics, feeder trees, and a stack of other topics. Welcome to my garden. Okay, all cleaned up. Here's most of what I pulled out. I had a fair bit of cooch that went on the burning pile. I don't like cooch in my veggie garden. We've had some lovely rain over the last week and everything is looking very alive this week. I have learnt more about chop and drop. One of the things I've learnt is that when you're doing chop and drop, it's ideal to do that during a growing season when there's adequate water for the plants to regrow. The result is all this beautiful arrowroot that I've been growing for the purpose of chop and drop, now's the time to chop it. So I'm going to be taking that down and laying it down at the back of the gardens as mulch this morning. That's my job. Now you'll see that I've got a lot of chop and drop along the back here. I've just chopped that down this morning. That came from the Queensland arrowroot and lemongrass that I have planted along here, which makes for a lovely lush feeling when you walk through the garden when it's 2 metres tall, but it makes for lovely lush chop and drop when you drop it in place. And there's some more chop and drop. At the front of this bed, I planted some cover crop seed. The cover crop has kept the ground so moist and so cool. It is very spongy. Has done a great job of protecting this ground. Cover crop has really done magic for the soil. This cover crop was the first cover crop that I planted in this garden design. So I've got 6 different seeds in it and it has grown beautifully. It was tall as me. The king parrots have had a great time feasting on the sunflowers. I have chopped down this cover crop and I have all this biomass. I probably should have stood on the other side and chopped it and dropped it on the other side. Now I've got to carry it all the way around. Once I've put this in place, then I'll put all the Queensland arrowroot on top of it too. This is a mature version of the same stuff, and the king parrots have been absolutely loving the sunflowers. They're often in the garden while I'm in here. Here's your crotalaria. It grows quite big, and we all know sunflowers. The bees have loved it. And a legume, another legume, and here we have it, all chopped and dropped. Looking very different from how it looked a week ago. All the chop and drop at the back here. Along the back here I've got more Queensland arrowroot and vetiver. As you can see, we've got a nice thick row of mulch here now. All chopped and dropped. I also pruned the lemongrass I've got growing here. All the rest of the chop and drop I lay on the row behind the fruit trees. Such lush mulch does this arrowroot make. So you can see how I've got this bed set up. It's following the pattern of what I like to do with my beds. I've got chop and drop, and then I've got a row of fruit trees down the middle of the 3 metre bed. And then I have annual vegetables at the front. I have considered putting some trees along the back to use as chop and drop. I haven't done that at this stage. I've been concerned about what plants to grow. It's something I want to do, but I'm yet to find the right trees. I chopped this Queensland arrowroot this morning and it's so moist. And as I was chopping it, the water was spurting out like kids with water guns. It's amazing. Now this one, that's Monday morning I cut that. So today is Wednesday and it's already got all that growth on it. Queensland arrowroot grows really fast. And lemongrass, I chopped it this morning. Look at the growth on that. That was from this morning. So it will replace itself really quickly. I've been doing a lot of reading about Syntropics and I understand some of the concepts. All plants capture carbon. All plants, as they grow, put organic matter into the soil. some in the form of the roots of the plants and some in the form of the sugars that they send down to the roots and then into the soil. What they've sent down, the sugars, are available to other plants and they share. It's also available to the mycorrhizal network and the microbes and fungi and bacteria in the soil. And when you prune those trees, you create biomass on the surface, and the trees prune their roots, which becomes organic matter under the soil, which is then available to microbes to turn into the nutrients that the plants need. So I understand that. And spider's web. Good morning, Mr. Spider. May I pass? And I understand that all plants can do that. So when I planted these gardens, I started by planting the fruit trees down the centre. I planted cover crop at the front so that the cover crop could start pumping glucose and carbon into the soil. And I thought I would prune it off. And then these wonderful flowers, particularly the sunflowers, attracted the king parrots. And so I delayed pruning it. So this particular cover crop here, Contour 1, became quite overgrown. With the cover crop, it was taller than I could reach. So then I pruned that down and dropped it here, and now I'm watching the plants grow back. I made a post on a Syntropics forum on Facebook, and I had some feedback. It was very clearly, you're not doing Syntropics because I don't have any feeder trees. Now, feeder trees would be trees that you plant for the purpose of feeding the trees that you want to keep. When you prune them, they'll prune their roots. That's putting extra organic matter in the soil, and I understand that. I thought I could get away with doing it with cover crop, and I see now that I can't. But this has been my adventure. This has been my learning journey. So here's the first cover crop row that I planted. Actually, sorry, second one. And it grew up big and beautiful and was very lovely. King parrots had a great time with that. The other thing I thought I'd do with this row was to plant melons in line with each of the fruit trees. That was not a successful experiment. The melons climbed up through the cover crop, which was fine. But when I was pruning off the cover crop that continually fell towards my main fruit trees, I noticed that I kept accidentally cutting off the melons because they were so intertwined. I also wonder if they didn't get enough sunlight because those didn't live. So now I've been chopping down my cover crop. Well, I've left some of the height there for a couple of reasons. One, I want to test and learn if a chopped cover crop can act a little bit in the way that you expect a Syntropics chop and drop to work, in that I've chopped it, it's still growing, it will prune its roots, it'll put the organic matter in the soil and make it available for the plants. And I want to see if there's any growth change along here as a result of me pruning it back. Which means I'm going to have to be patient and not prune that end just yet, just so I can learn and see if there's any change. The other reason I've left it there is because I think the stalks of the sunflowers are going to be very useful to help me get the vines off the garden and keep them from smothering the fruit trees. Although now that the avocado are up a bit, it's not so crucial, but my citrus are still very small, which is actually quite a surprise. Maybe they'll grow faster this next coming season. That's what I'm learning at the moment. I think I do need to plant some feeder trees along the back here. The question is what though? Now the recommended plants are Acacia and Eucalyptus. I don't know exactly which eucalyptus people recommend to plant. I do know some eucalyptus put out allopathic substances and they will inhibit the growth of other things. Well, that clearly doesn't work because once this chop and drop row is gone, this will become annual vegetable garden. Just the same as this bed has annual vegetable garden in the front of it. So I don't want to plant any trees that are going to result in an inability to plant vegetables or something that's going to inhibit the growth of my fruit trees. I also know that some eucalyptus roots will mat the ground and create problems, too many surface roots. So I don't know what kind of eucalyptus to use, so I'm a bit hesitant to plant them. The other recommended is Acacia, that's your wattles. And as I use the wattles that were already on this property for chop and drop, I think you can see some down there on the boundary line. As I use them for chop and drop, I realise that Acacia encourage so many ants. And as I'm working with the Acacia, I am having ants climb up my sleeve and up my pants, and it's just exceedingly unpleasant. So I'm not keen to encourage all those ants into my veggie garden. So I don't know that I want acacias in my garden either. But wanting to harness the value of chop and drop, I've been using what else I have around here. These are either jacarandas or poincianas. And I have been using these for chop and drop. I chopped them all yesterday and put them on the other end of the contour. Such a lot of biomass from all of these. So that's what I've been using for biomass at this stage. That back area down there is mainly broadleaf pepper and Chinese celtis. Both of them are weed species, and I have been pruning out some of those trees, removing them and using the leaves for chop and drop. So I'm experimenting with other plants. You've also got tulip wood, and I've been using those, and that has a leaf that's really nice to use for chop and drop too. So I'm thinking maybe rather than going with the plants that concern me, I can use some of the tulip wood. So this is a chop and drop I did yesterday and the day before. You can see the wattle on top. So many ants. And you can see the tulip wood underneath. The other thing I'm not a fan of wattle for is the branches don't soften. Over here on contour 1, I had a couple of rows of wattle for chop and drop, and the sticks just never rotted. It's only been 6 months, so what am I complaining about? The sticks didn't seem to rot down, and when I was planting along here in front of these pear and apple trees, the sticks were still in the soil, and I had to move them to get them out of the road. I added them to the back chop and drop row. I won't be putting chop and drop in front of the fruit trees again because that reduces the amount of space I have for seasonal vegetables. It's all a learning experience, and I have learned that I need to plant something, but maybe there are other things I can plant, like tulip wood. Or these jacarandas have been great for chop and drop too. Cover crop was great. I've got so much biomass from the cover crop. Generally, when I've completed a full layer, I cover the full layer of chop and drop with a layer of grass clippings, so that's useful. Here's my new contour, and you can see I've got the grass clippings here. Now that was over a row of Chinese celtis and broadleaf pepper that I'd got from down the front gully. And the grass clippings, I don't know, I think it makes it look tidy. And it weighs it down so that the branches that would tend to stick up and be messy are just contained. I'm sure I can find some locally growing feeder trees that can serve me well for chop and drop. And that part of my learning journey continues.